Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duval, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who could totally do the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs if someone would just explain what that means.
Tim Longo. Well, let me tell you what that... No, just kidding.
Yeah, I was going to say, you don't know. What's a parsec?
No, nobody knows what a parsec is, really. It's a unit of... I think the official...
It's a unit of distance of how far light travels in a second in vacuum.
Is it actually... I didn't know it was actually a term. I thought it was a Star Wars-ism. I thought he made that up.
No, it's a real thing.
But I think he... I'm
totally wrong. It is a unit of distance used in astronomy equal to about 3.26 light years. 1 parsec corresponds to the distance at which the mean radius of the Earth's orbit subtends an angle of 1 second of arc. Obviously.
Okay. Well, I think the irony is I think it's officially on the books that George used that word, but he doesn't mean for it to actually be the true meaning.
It can't because it's a unit of distance. He uses it as a unit of time.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah, of course. Anyway.
Hello, and welcome back to Star Wars, a place where words mean nothing.
Dark forces, huh?
Yeah, no, it's been really fun to revisit this game because this section had literally one of my favorite moments in all of gaming, just of my history of playing games, where you meet the Dark Trooper
Phase 1,
Mark 1, Phase 1, whatever it is, the Terminator looking thing.
Yeah.
And it chases you around in these circles. And I was literally streaming this on Saturday and coming up to that point and going, oh my God, I think this is it. This is the part. Because I can remember how terrified I was when I was playing that section. When I originally played this game in 97 or so. It is so good. It's such a good time. It's such a good moment. It's surprising and it's relentless. It feels like the Terminator, even though that's a different universe. But it's a great thing.
Yeah, like I said last episode, that I'd done some testing on this and obviously played it a few times before I think I started even, and so this level like definitely haunts me. That particular level, the mines, and the interesting thing, kind of analyzing it as we played it this time, is it does a good job at making you feel like you're descending and kind of getting down into this complicated mine. So you have this sense that you're pretty deep by the time you get to that moment. And so I feel like it adds this weightiness even more so because you're in the middle of the planet. You feels like you're down deep into the earth of it. And then when I got down
and isolated, right?
Isolated,
there's nobody to help you.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do. And then for whatever reason, I had the map on, the tab, the overlay map on when I got there. And I had immediately had these cold sweats start because I remember I had some memory of the layout of the level visually, like the top-down layout. So the green, overlay. So I was running around kind of before I put the charge in, running around, basically uncovering the fog of war. It's cool to watch the map grow, by the way, the vector. Part of the map. And so then when I sort of those telltale sort of loops, the way the level, I don't know if you saw the map, but the loops
I do.
And they kind of come back around to that center section. And for some reason that diagram or that shape is burned into my brain. And so I just had these weird flashbacks and I was like, oh man, this is it. And just so much terror. And then the sound
it makes that kind of mechanical,
terrible,
really good. And, what I remembered was getting into those circles, which are basically circular tunnels, or I don't know, a high wall like a chasm or something like that. But it's not geologic; it's metal and stuff. But I can remember being in there and losing track of the thing, and not knowing which side it was going to come from. The first time I played. Not so much this time because I'm playing on a easier difficulty. And I'm fairly certain I played this on hard the first time I played it because that's what I used to do.
Yeah.
And being in there, absolutely terrified because the lethality was so high if you played on hard. And that thing felt like a complete menace. Whereas, it doesn't so much an easy. I don't know if it's because I had more ammo and things like that. Certainly, I feel like I need to go and play a few levels where I just delve in and figure out how it feels to play it on a harder difficulty, maybe just medium, because I don't think I have the time to play it on hard. But quite a moment.
Well, we didn't talk about this in pre-show, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the sort of save system and checkpoints and lives. I think that adds a tension that I forgot about. And maybe it added tension back then too on a harder difficulty. And I'm not sure because I haven't lost all of my lives yet, but what happened? Has that happened to you yet? Or what happens if you lose all your lives? Because there essentially seem to be checkpoints. So
there are, and it's basically game over. I'm pretty sure
when you lose the lives.
When you lose all the lives, so you have to basically reload. Right, you have to reload a save from earlier, or basically start the mission.
You just start the mission over, and you probably have 3 to start, like an arcade kind of.
Right, you'll have a minimum of 3 to start any given level. This actually happened to me on the ice level. So I kept dying and dying and dying on the ice level, and mostly. And this is something we did talk about in pre-show. Mostly it was because I had trouble controlling on the ice. And I don't know why it was particularly bad for me, but it was horrible. And I was really frustrated by the choice to have the thing that made the ice not a big deal be in the level. Like, why? I have to go find this thing that makes the level not be a pain in the butt. That was a weird choice for me. But I kept basically sliding off the edge at a place where you needed to jump and falling and taking a huge amount of fall damage, and then being basically unable because of the having to build up momentum and then suddenly sliding really fast of the ice, that I would end up slipping off to the other side of this chasm, which was bottomless or something. And so you had to die there. And so I just I'd go off this edge and I'd be like, oh, I guess this game's over because I'm never going to get out of this chasm. It was that part was super frustrating, but I think I did that there. And there was another thing in there that was frustrating where there was a door that you could open. And if you went up and stood to open the door, a crusher would come down. So I don't know if that crushed you. It's in the area with the,
I think
the conveyor belts.
Oh yeah, I think I know where. I think I just saw that coming and quickly sprint jumped through or something. And you can
avoid it. It's a timing thing, and I didn't realize. I thought you had to open the door to trigger him, but I think later I realized, oh no, I probably could have just triggered it and stepped out of the way, and then had it not come down and had a chance to run forward and do that. But yeah, that was the level that took me the longest to get through. I mean, I literally was like, you know what? I need to take a break now, stream. I'm going to come back and finish this tomorrow.
No.
I was just really at the point of okay, I am frustrated and I'm starting to get angry. I'm going to take a break, which is a thing I recommend whenever people are frustrated and angry at games. Take a break. It's fine. Yeah. You're doing this for fun.
Yeah, so I think... there's the checkpoint. And what I noticed is I think I had gotten up to 6 or so lives. And I'm, for whatever reason, I wanted to hoard those. And so I think I had, early in one of the levels, I had a kind of a dumb death that I could have avoided easily. And I felt dumb for dying in that way. It might have even been in the mines. And so I just I quit out and reloaded the level, and I had 6 lives again.
Yeah, I think it maintains your best start. There's some cumulative save that it maintains.
It's a little weird. It's a weird system.
It's a weird hybrid of arcade game.
Yeah, and really clear.
And it's not clear where the checkpoints are either. So
no, not at all. No, I mean, you can, but and I think I had trouble. In the elevator section, I was telling Brett that I did cheat and get a hint on. I could not remember how to deal with the elevators, in the what is it, the detention center,
right?
how to get to Crix Medine and such. And so I did to how to situate those things and figure that thing out. And I forgot about the diagram on the wall and all this stuff. But then there's also the jumping section with the smasher while you're getting through the innards of that detention center, and you can get crushed by the trash compactor there, and you have to do those time jumps with those pistons that are going up and down. I had trouble there too.
Right, yeah.
But sprint jump.
Yeah, that was the point at which I was saying, what is this, Galaxy Quest? Because there's that scene in Galaxy Quest where they have to go through this weird section to get to the engine core or something like that. It's pretty late in the movie, and it reflects some earlier episode of the show and they're going through it like, why did they do this on the stupid show? Why would you ever design this way? That you have to time all your, when you move and all that stuff. Totally reminded me of that. It is a strange phenomenon in science fiction that you have these things that are just going to kill any person that goes into them ever. unless they perfectly time it. It was in The Rock too, so it's just a weird trope of science fiction especially, but action movies in general.
A tension-filled obstacle that requires some skill or something, and it works well for games, sort of, but yeah, it can be frustrating. Yeah, I just like, man, the Mines is such a memorable level, and that Terminator moment just, it forever ingrained. As a segue, another topic I wanted to hit that we talked a little bit about last time, but I wanted to reinforce because we had some really great versions of this in this series of levels, is just the Star Wars fantasy fulfillment that they chose for each level, and things like the detention center is take that scene from episode 4 where they're rescuing Leia and make a whole level about that, and what could you do with that, and complete with destroying walls and going inside the wall to find not only secrets, but then using that to actually get to Crix, to your target, going through the trash compactor, and then I would say even Nar Shaddaz's sort of, not necessarily explicitly, it's a Coruscant kind of level, not explicitly a scene from the movie per se, but there were elements of it, and you just felt like you were finally getting to run through these cities, these Star Wars cities that you heard about, but didn't really explicitly see. You see them later in the prequels and stuff, but just this kind of sense of going through the cargo holds of these places, and the inner workings of what it's like to be inside a Star Wars film, and they just did a great job at that.
One of the things that's really interesting about that is that because they don't have a lot of ability to do basically props, they're doing this without having TIE fighters and I don't know, other things that would be Empire specific. They're doing it just with the level geometry, which is basically BSP in most cases. There are places where you've got sort of the concentric circles that you see at the very beginning of New Hope. And you've got places where you've got the sort of very bright walls, which also makes me think of the Empire. These are the sorts of things that when we were doing Republic Commando were things that people, we had a point where we basically got everybody together and said, what does the game need more of? And they were like, well, the environments don't feel super Star Warsy, and we had to drill down and figure out what that was. And some of it was that it just didn't feel like the Empire's space that you were in, even though we weren't entirely in the Empire. But as a result, there were definitely places that didn't feel super Star Warsy, and we had to think about what that meant and dress them up a little bit to make them feel more that way. But this game just nails it as far as that goes.
Yeah,
even in places you've never been.
Yeah, and I think it's some of it is the flow, the level design, but some of it is just great, like you said, great texture work. In this day and age, textures, because the geometry was so simplistic, had to be texture artists were really king as far as like selling that fantasy, and that was a really big deal then, and it still is now, but it's like more holistic, environment art is it's not as simple as that anymore. So texture art is
here it's what you're going to put on the wall, because all you're going to have is a wall.
It's just
in terms of the geometry.
bitmap or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it was just fun to revisit some of those levels because they just hit that mark really, really hard. The other thing that I forgot about, and kind of I already mentioned because I mentioned that I got that hint for the detention level specifically is I've forgotten how, I don't know, I guess puzzle like some of the levels are when it comes to just navigation generally, where you have to get, in some cases, the key card or the key code for certain places to get through the doors, and you know where the door is. But some of it, for me at least, was just finding that right door or the right place. And I don't think it was necessarily that they wanted you to get lost or anything, and that they were trying to make it complex. I feel like it was just inherent in the way that they were designing the levels to kind of obfuscate or hide the main path a little bit, to give you maybe some red herrings or kind of how do you get through this level to your destination? You know, maybe where you need to go, but you're just trying to figure out how to get there. And the best example I can think of is Nar Shaddaa, specifically because early in the level, you come out on that big precipice with the big central shaft, and you see the catwalk that ends up being the end of the level. And you see the Rees out there throwing their Hail Mary.
I'm sorry.
The three-eyed aliens that throw.
What are they called?
Rees. Rees, I believe, is that might not be the species. That might be the name of the dude.
Okay, I didn't know what that was, so I was very curious.
The guys that are throwing thermal jets,
right.
Alien race.
Yeah, no, I know who you're talking about, but I didn't know what they were called. So
Rees is either the name of the first character that we saw in the film, or it's the name of the species. So we'll probably get somebody to correct me on that, but I got that part. Anyway, you see them throwing, it's kind of good telegraphing because you see them trying to throw their thermal detonators at you all that way. And then you'd spend the rest of the level navigating through all of these winding ways and the cargo and all this stuff. And then you end up getting onto that catwalk at the very end and going through there and getting whatever the MacGuffin is in that time. I forget, it's some code. But it was just great. Like you know, that full circle, we talked a little bit about it with Half-Life as well, where you see your destination and it's kind of, how do I get there? And the level becomes the gameplay versus just a receptacle for combat. You know what I mean? And again, kind of going back to my point in the last episode of just like the really just stellar level design and just thoughtful sense of architecture and sense of place and meaning. And yeah, there's definitely some random hallways that make no sense here and there. And, you know, but for a game of this kind at this time, having each level have such a strong theme and identity, you know, and other than, like you said, the ice station maybe not being the best one, most of them have a great identity that's pretty memorable and pretty good, you know, and I think it continues for the rest of it. Yeah.
So, I mean, two things. One, they're called Grands.
Okay. Right. So I did. It was the name of the dude.
Yeah. Two, I mean, it's interesting because just a game ago, we were talking about how having those diversions and being a little lost like that was really frustrating. But I think you've kind of settled in on the reason why, and that is this game is not just about the combat.
Yeah.
And not that God of War is just about the combat, but it's far more about the combat. And so having these areas which are non-linear in that game felt kind of weird, especially when you didn't know where to go. And and we don't need to recover that ground. It was just kind of
what I have after you're done. I have the one main difference for me, at least, that I'll share. But go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, there's a couple of things. Is that there's this sense that you're like Han and Luke in the Death Star in New Hope, and not really sure where to go and what to do. You're kind of stepping into the footsteps of these heroes and out of your depth in some ways, and I feel like that really works. But also because it's a first-person game, where the combat is often sort of brief and they're not just spawning guys in that you have to deal with and things like that. It feels the balance of combat and level design, or level traversal, I guess I should say, as a player, feels a little bit more balanced in that way, a little bit more even. And so it's okay that in that case that sometimes you'll go down a blind alley. They'll also often reward you with secrets. The particular cases where we called out God of War were more about, why do I not know which one I should do here? Was often the frustration. And here, I don't think there's ever like a causal issue of like, oh, I needed to go here and I didn't know that to do that first because whatever. Because I think you always know, oh, I need to find this key. I didn't find the key over here. I must have to go the other way and find the key.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not perfect all the time because you definitely can find the door before the key and all that. But or even vice versa, you might have.
I was going to say in Nar Shaddaa there was a key that I found and never had to use.
Well, so that's the thing is you found it, and when you used it on the door you needed it for, it doesn't give you an indication that it opened that door. There's not like a text doesn't pop up. So I tested that out actually because I wanted to see
that red key. There was a red key and a blue key in that level.
Yeah, you need them both, and I'm pretty sure. And you just found it first, and then when you got to the door where you needed it, then it just opened it, and it didn't tell you used the key.
I'm going to go back and look at the tape because that's all in my Twitch channel. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure because I feel like I didn't find the red key right away, and I had a door I couldn't get through. But anyway, it could be wrong on that. But I don't think it gives you an indication either way.
No, I don't think it tells you when you use them, but I didn't think I ever went back to the door where I needed it. But I mean, it's possible I did. I think the one thing that I find frustrating in some of the levels is that I do totally get turned around.
Yeah. No. I mean, you still get lost.
Have a really hard time, and I'll pop open the map and I'll look at it and be like, where am I trying to go now?
Yeah. So for sure. I mean, I have the tab map open quite a bit. I'm definitely not saying I don't get lost and there couldn't be better landmarking at times. But there are times when I enjoy that kind of exploration of trying to figure that out. And for me, with the God of War example, which I guess we talked about, so I won't dwell on it, but for me, it's just some of it is the inherent nature of the genres of the two games, because I think the camera in God of War fights the exploration goal.
Right.
And in a first-person game, inherently, if you have the level design to support it, then first-person games are good at exploration because you're controlling the camera always. So, in my opinion. So anyway, so that was something I just had forgotten with some of these levels. They're just kind of fun to kind of figure it out, but you definitely get turned around quite a bit. So I agree with you there.
Yeah, no, that was fine. There were sections though where I was like, I don't know how to get out of this room, and I'd open the map and I'd look for some gap or what was I missing and how to get out of this room again. Oh, look, there's 2 pixels over here that I can get through. I didn't realize, Nar Shaddaa especially was that way for me.
You got to use the map for sure on Nar Shaddaa because it's everything looks so samey. I wanted to ask you, I forgot to ask this in pre-show, but I think I had read someplace that on the mines level, and then I can think of another lighting example, the red hue of the level, was that kind of an innovation at the time? I read that someplace, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I think, it's sort of an atmospheric effect.
Yeah.
And that definitely would have been, that's not something you see in other first-person shooter renderers of the time, and was some sort of innovation. It's hard for me really to know what they're doing there at this point, because we would never do anything the way that they do any of this game anymore. And having not worked on a shooter quite this old, because it was already a decade later that we shipped Republic Commando. It's hard for me to know. Yeah. Like, what did they do for some of these things? Were they basically slowly scrolling like I don't even know if they could afford to have the fill rate of a texture in front of the camera or something like that. It's really hard to know. Yeah. Those are the sorts of things that I feel like are probably lost to time to some degree, unless engineers specifically remember, oh, I did this or I did that.
Maybe you might get some thing. Memory of that. Yeah. And then the other one that I appreciated was that spiral, let's see, what was it? It was must have been the research facility, the first one we played. That spiral staircase that you have that big rotating elevator thing that you have to go and get the data from the middle. And it has that big stairway, and you have to go and press the button and rotate the thing around.
Oh, right.
Multiple times and go into the doors that are up the staircase. There were spinning lights in that hallway as you go spiraling up that were pretty cool. And I felt like that might have been kind of a neat use of their sort of pixel based, their lighting system we talked about last time.
Possibly. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on in
vertex-based, I meant.
Right, in sections like that. Yeah, I'm almost certainly some sort of vertex-based solution to make that work, just because of performance. There's no way they could really do anything more complicated. But you also, in that section, have that big, basically, geometry rotating around.
Pretty
and again,
cool.
It's effectively two rectangular prisms. It's not super complicated, but they're mixing in with the BSP. They're mixing in these sort of elements like the Moldy Crow, which seamlessly fit in with the environment. And in that case, you actually walk across it. And probably what they're doing is
swapping. Yeah. They're
swapping in some collision or something like that to make that work. But you're actually seeing a 3D model move around and all of that stuff. I mean, it's interesting. They're very constrained, and when they do this, like, you can't directly interact with that thing while it's doing that and stuff like that. So there's definitely constraints, but it's, it reminds me, this is a thing I think of when I see old Disney movies. They're always exploring something a little bit different, a little bit new within the movies that they do. So like you see Pinocchio, and there's a scene where there's a huge stained glass window, and it looks different from the rest of the movie. All the rest of the movie looks totally different than this one shot, and it stands out. And the same thing happens in Bambi, where there's a shot, and I can't remember the one in Bambi, but there's just these moments in these early films and animation where you're seeing something that you haven't seen before, and it's so limited in how it's used. That it sort of stands out, and you're like, well, that's like in a different movie. And then another movie will come along 4 or 5 years later, and it will have more of that, whatever that is. I sort of feel that here. Like, you have these 3D objects, and then of course you go to Jedi Knight, and there's, like you pointed out last time, all the characters are polygonal, and they're low. They're not very high poly, but they're all polygonal. All the environments are polygonal, sort of mixed with BSP. There's kind of some weirdness going on there, and then eventually, as time goes on, we're transitioning to fully 3D environments with no real BSP. We might use BSP as a optimization, but we're not using it to directly render level geometry. So a lot of changes happen over time, but you see sort of these spots where you're like, oh, they're trying something different here. Like, it's all sprites everywhere except for these few 3D objects. And I love seeing that stuff.
It
feels like history being made, right?
Yeah. I mean, and that still even happens today, right? With visual effects, still some are sprite based and some are volumetric and stuff. So it's like we're still using some of those old techniques, depending on the need and the purpose. And
we're going to see more ray tracing start to happen, because the amount of parallel processing that happens on the chips is just extraordinary these days. So it's there's more stuff coming, and we've seen that before. I mean, I think in Fable, the map room is ray traced. I mean, in graphic stuff, you see it all the time where you go into spots where you're like, wow, this is really different. This is different from the other things. There's this one thing that's strange about it, and that sort of thing is really interesting to me in these sort of border cases of this game, which is mostly 2D with the BSP rendering. But everything else is 2D, and then occasionally you have these elements. So it's super interesting to see. Yeah. As an engineer, as a nerd,
Yeah. Shifting topics a little bit, another one I forgot to mention in pre-show. I'm not sure if I'm hitting any of the ones we talked about in pre-show.
I was going to say, at this point, we'll never get to the ones we talked about, but that's fine.
Well, just really quick call out, but I had forgotten that they track secrets percentage in the UI. And I also had forgotten, like, if you're playing Golden Path, which I'll be honest, I'm generally just playing Golden Path to kind of get through for time.
So you're going to have to tell people what Golden Path means.
We haven't talked about that before?
We have never said those two words.
Come on.
Together.
All right.
Well, I mean,
I don't know. It's probably pretty obvious, but Golden Path is just the golden route to finish the level from start to finish, doing no additional content, right?
It's the necessary and sufficient content.
Yeah, the most minimal things you can do to get through it. So, so Golden Path to make sure. So that's what essentially the fastest way to play through a game without getting any additional stuff. And so in this game, I had forgotten how many secrets there are, and that they track the secrets. And so when it comes to my memory of this game being a lot longer than it actually is, because these levels, when you're playing through them pretty quickly, they're not that long.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure most of the time I would play most of the secrets when I'd played in the past. And so that actually, some of the secrets are pretty hard. I accidentally found a few of them that are kind of just happen to be there. But there's actually quite a bit of level design and cool trickery if you're going after those. So that's like a whole sub level of this game that I'd forgotten about, and it's pretty deep if you try to be a completionist about it.
Yeah, it's pretty common for other first person shooters of the era. I mean, even Wolfenstein had them and tracked the percentage, and certainly so.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
so it's not. It doesn't stand out to me. It feels like a requirement of the genre at the time. Something I feel like we've mostly moved away from. Which is kind of a shame. Everybody likes to find a secret. I mean, that's kind of a cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think with yeah, that's true. I feel like we've gone so heavy on optional content that the secrets have kind of turned into side content or side missions or something like that instead. Not necessarily secret, but I think I just don't have a strong connection to Doom and Wolfenstein, so that's probably why that stands out for me. And I also feel like the secrets in this game are a little more motivated than my memory of finding the secret wall that opens up as a door, or those sorts of things that are more
that
just
was almost all of it.
Secrets.
That was almost all of it in Wolfenstein for sure. Of just like, oh, this texture's different, I should shoot it. I mean, that's true of Doom too. It's mostly just the secrets are just, are you paying attention to the level geometry, and really just like individual wall textures more than anything else. So, oh, look, there's this picture of Hitler on the wall, and that's the only one I see. I should shoot it, right?
Yeah.
So it's very simplistic, I think. I actually haven't been looking at my secret percentage. The thing I hate about secret percentages.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I want to know how many. Like,
are
there 12 of them? I don't want to see 10%. Well, 10%, I'd be like, oh, there's 10. Or maybe there's 20, though. Maybe I got 2 and there's 20. I want to know how many there are. Just tell me I got 1 out of 13, please. Don't make me do the math. But anyway, that's a thing.
Yeah, and I just think some of these are really motivated, like and a little and elaborate too. Shooting a button from across the room, or looking for a gashed wall that you can throw a thermal detonator at, and there's stuff behind it. So, or some of them are even navigating the level in a different way. And then you get to a room that's been built out, pretty as much as any other room, but it was just there to find a secret. So, I don't know. It's just a quick shout out.
No, they're fun things to find, and it's especially when it's a built out thing and not just a thing slides away and there's 2 10 by 10 rooms behind it that you can walk into. It is really fun to find a thing that I wonder if I can get up there. I mean, this is sort of the thing that you sort of think. I mean, I love that in games when I see it today of I wonder how you get up there. And it might be a platformer. There's any number of things that might be like, how do I use the systems to get up there? I mean, here the systems are not super deep as far as that goes. You basically can run and jump. I guess occasionally you might crouch and you have the thermal detonators, but the ones that are like blow up this section of wall are kind of fairly easy to find. It's the navigating to some place you wouldn't have thought to try to get, that are trickier. So, And especially on these levels that have these huge canyons, I'm less prone to try to get them because
totally.
It activates my vertigo. I get near these huge fall offs and I'm terrified.
Yeah.
Weird thing. It's a weird thing. Anyway.
Well, and as a segue to one of our other topics, I know we did have on the list. Sometimes your gadgets can actually help you find secrets too, right? With your light or your infrared, goggles, you can see things a little bit more clearly. And then, of course, using the map, or like you said, exploiting the map can give you some hints too. But sometimes you still have to get over there, so it doesn't help you in every case. But yeah, the gadgets are an interesting addition to, I think, the genre at the time. It wasn't really doing too much of that. There's just a little dash of I don't know, RPG-ishness or something, because there's an inventory as well, and you actually have to go to your inventory to get the codes for some of these cards you get off. And I'd forgotten about that, but like that's an extra step that unless you know to do it, you may not think to go, because when I'd gotten to
these days we would just tell you, or you would just auto do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's the thing that's very different here is you come across one of those things, and the first few are fairly optional and they're effectively secrets, I guess. Later on, you have to do it. You have to, you basically have 5 of them or something like that in the level where you're getting Crix Maydeen out, the detention center.
Yeah.
But I think that the very first one you get is purely just a bonus. Can I go in here and get a bunch of health or something like that?
Maybe you're right. I feel like that the one in the research facility, I got stuck because I couldn't find the card with the code on it. But maybe it was optional. I don't know. Maybe I was stuck in a different place. But they're definitely on mission 4. I was stuck for a while until I got that code.
Maybe it's a critical path. I don't remember. It's hard to keep track of those things. But I do like the. That's a good point. I really like the go. I had totally forgotten that you have to go and actually look at the code things to get.
Yeah, it's a nice little touch.
Yeah, and it is a step of like I'm going to look through my stuff.
Yeah,
and that's a really interesting step. I mean, I would hesitate to call it anything having to do with an RPG, but I think this having inventories is an RPG thing, I guess.
That's what I mean.
Certainly
yeah, it's just a dash. Because we've talked about it in other episodes, I'm sure, and there's just that general RPG trend that kind of, I think it's one of those genres that crept into a lot of other genres, right? And this, I feel like. There's obviously some X-Wing going on here, but also with the mission briefings and just kind of the setup and, but the concept of having inventory, yeah, I mean, other genres definitely had it, but it was just enough of a little bit of a feeling like, because it's also persistent gear across the game, right? Your ammo, your life, your inventory, I believe.
Yes. You can put the ice cleats on in Nar Shaddaa if you want.
You
still
exactly.
have them.
Yeah. No. So there's kind of that sense of adventure where you're going across a span of a game, and multiple planets. That sense of kind of that. I wrote down the same note last time too, but high adventure keeps coming into my notes, and just this, you just get the sense you're going across the galaxy and doing all these crazy things, and you're really like. You nailed it for playing this when Solo's coming out, because you really feel like that rogue, that merc rogue kind of figure in Star Wars, just gallivanting around, getting these missions from your pal, and then meeting these larger than life Star Wars characters. They just nail it. And these little gadgets are just another little element that it's a part of the films, they're not a heavy part, but there's little gadgets and things that people have, and the macro binoculars and all these little
that's the binoculars I thought of immediately. Yep, absolutely. So really there's a sense you're rubbing up against historical things that are going on, just historic
Boba Fett,
sort of actions that are happening, right? Yeah, Boba Fett,
out of the light,
but also what's her name? What's her name again?
Mon Mothma.
Mon Mothma. I mean, you're talking with these people who are really important to the films, and
Darth Vader
Boba
says
Fett's
your name.
Darth Vader says, Darth Vader says your name. He never said my name.
Like that. Well, I mean,
which is my Star Wars name.
I'm just saying, to hear Darth Vader say Kyle Katarn's name, you know what I mean, kind of legitimizes it some, you know what I mean, in a, as we now know, an extended fiction kind of way still, but for a fan and a Star Wars geek, like, I don't care, you know, it's still him, whether it's canon or not. It just kind of adds to the mythos of it. And then Kyle goes on to do many other things after this game, so he apparently stood the test of time to some degree. So
I mean, I love at least the first two games. I love a lot. I mean, they're definitely some of the best Star Wars games made, and this one really holds up quite well. I've been
surprised.
I've been very surprised because I did try to play this a few years back, and maybe 5 years ago, and the graphics were really off-putting, and I might have been playing on a laptop or something, but I found that it made me a little motion sick, and so I backed off really quickly. And this time I'm not having that, so that's helpful. But also, the graphics are fine; they're not bothering me in the least. I don't know what was going on there. I do feel like maybe I was trying to play on a laptop, and it was just really close to my face. And where I play now is a little bit more space, and it works a little bit better. But anyway, it's been interesting to revisit it from that standpoint.
This game has a heavy head bob in it too, which you can turn off.
I turn that off. Yeah. I need to. Yeah, that's what made me unable to finish the Jedi Academy ones because I'm prone to the motion sickness. But we'll talk about that later. We have a question about that this week. I do like. I mean, getting back to your point, I do like the gadgets, and it's a thing that I actually really like about No One Lives Forever as well, is that there's a lot of gadgets in that game, and I wouldn't say that game necessarily owes anything to this specifically, but there is definitely an immersion into a world when they have specific tools that are unique to that space and only make sense in that space. I do really like that, even if I think it's idiotic to have the ice cleats, not a thing that you just get. So I would rather just have a quick little, I'm going to put on my ice cleats now than have to find them. I'm going to complain about that until we're done finishing this game. So I'm putting you on notice.
Just put your ice cleats on at the last level.
That said, I like the gas mask, which is basically the same thing, but I don't know. It's a different feeling to me than, I can't move versus, I've fallen into a space and I have to figure out why I'm dying.
It's easier to find that. I feel like I got the gas mask really easily.
I think it's critical path. I think
it's just sitting there, right?
I think you get it in that there's a room where I think you have to hit a button, and I think it's in there.
Maybe so. Yeah.
So you're not going to miss it. I think you basically have to jump on top of it to get it. But
it's but that's a digital need, though, right? With the ice cleats, you don't need. I didn't actually get the ice cleats. I guess I'm just better than you. I just kind of slid around and jumped around a lot and finally got
you're used to being very slippery.
There we go. Good work. You brought it back around. I'll give you that one. But my point is you have to find the gas mask to continue, right? You can't.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah. I guess technically not. But I think it would be extremely difficult not to have it.
Pretty rough, yeah, because you have to fight. You have to fight them in that section.
Yeah, let's talk about them, the Dark Troopers, a little bit. We mentioned the phase 1. This second encounter with the two of them was a lot trickier. It was a little weird because when I actually got through it, the phase 1 trooper that you fight second, I somehow evaded and then was in some tunnels that I could maneuver a little bit better. But these are really interesting sections, and it's building up pretty well to the climax of the game where you're going to fight, what's his name? The bad general or whatever. I forget his name already. He's sort of another Thrawn in some respects. Good call. Yeah, he totally is. Yeah, I mean, he's basically filling in that kind of structural position. But whatever his name is, he also looks a little bit like Rip Burger, so there's that too. That's a total different thing. The Full Throttle villain.
Oh yeah, you're right. General Moke.
Oh right, Moke. Yeah,
Moke. I guess it's
MOHC. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're anyway. He's gonna be flying around and stuff later, but I like. Oh, dude, sorry. 25-year-old game. I really like the introductions of each of these trooper models. I mean, it actually worked out really well for me. Maybe the first time I encountered the Dark Trooper 2. We already talked about the Dark Trooper 1, but I happened to be at the right place in the level where he would come out, as it turned out. I don't know why that happened, but it did.
For the second one?
The second one in the mine.
Yeah.
Did you? I mean, did that happen for you or not?
Wait, in the mine?
The place where you need the gas masks. The ice.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, that's the robotics facility.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah,
the robotics facility. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I was in a pretty good spot too because that one wasn't too hard for me. I don't know why. I just spazzed out and can use the fusion cutter, I think, and just took them down fast. I save up my ammo a lot, so I usually have that to spare.
I had a lot of that left. He took me down in a hurry. I don't know why. I had a lot of trouble with that level just overall for a number of reasons. I must have died to him 3 or 4 times as well. That level was the hardest, and I'm playing on easy. I was embarrassed at how much trouble I had.
It's not. There are times when they put certain combos of enemies together. It gets pretty hard, even on easy.
Yeah,
but continue with your.
But no, I really liked how sort of this wall comes up, and he's been hiding behind it, waiting for you, basically to do what you're doing. Yeah. And I don't know. I think there's a revive in behind him, or maybe a weapon. I mean, what you really want is the weapon power up, the thing that the super weapon power up.
Maybe that's what I did. Actually, I got that and didn't realize it because I feel like I ripped him to shreds. But
if you get that, it is a totally different fight. Because the next when I finally beat him, I basically ran away, and I ended up going all the way around the map and coming back to where he had come out of, and found that, and I was like, oh. Now I can do it. Because now I fire twice as fast, which is also a weird gadgety sort of thing to tie back with that. These sort of, now you can, I mean, it's a total arcadey game.
Yeah, there's a shield one too.
Yeah, there's a shield super power up where you basically don't lose shields, I think is what's going on with that one. And here you basically have double fire rate or something like that. I don't know if it basically doubles up and uses the same amount of ammo.
Seems like, something like that.
Or if you're going through it twice as fast. But it is pretty amazing that suddenly it's like, I'm firing really fast now. And it's that's a good carryover from arcades, to be honest, for me. I feel like lives are not, but I feel like power-ups like this that really don't make any sense whatsoever, but just make the game fun, I'm totally happy with. So... interesting. It's an interesting mix of those.
Yeah, they're just a good versus the lives. They're a good object-based dynamic difficulty reward for explorers. You know what I mean? Because to your point, where maybe I used it and didn't realize I was using it. Now that I think about it, but so for me it was a little accidental. But this fight's really hard. Well, we talked about this with God of War, I think, right? This is really hard. If I explore a little bit more, I'm going to get rewarded for that, and then make the future a little easier. Right. If I'm choosing to do things that way. A small tidbit to something you just mentioned with your story about fighting in this section. When you run away from them and you lose track of them, and you're just kind of going through the tunnels or whatever, it's just so terrifying because you're like,
it is, yeah.
They could be,
they could be anywhere.
Yeah,
I'm going to come
audio design is so good.
Be there.
Yeah.
No, it is really good. I mean, that is probably the defining characteristic of this game more than anything else, is just the level design is really fantastic. Yeah. Especially for the era, because it definitely feels a lot. It's weird in that it feels both more organic, but also more more appropriate to its fictional setting. We talked a lot about last time about how Doom's levels feel a lot more abstract or whatever. And that's maybe not true of Wolfenstein so much, because those do feel like you're basically going through whatever, real spaces, but just kind of blocky, boring spaces. This is both. You've got lots of uses of circles or just rounded bits. I mean, rounded staircases and all that stuff that just feels like a real human space.
Yeah, exactly. It feels intentional, and most of the time, it feels like I'm in this detention center, I'm in this robotics facility, or what have you, and you just, again, sense of place for me. I just and being such a Star Wars nerd, just having that fantasy of being in these places fully realized like that, just was mind blowing. Yeah.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about the way they're building this stuff up, because we've touched on a lot of things that they sort of build to, and where some of it hasn't even paid off yet. But it is really interesting how you're getting bit by bit the stuff about these dark troopers. You go and you find what is it called? Like the fricks or the frick? I forget what the special metal or whatever.
Yep, frick, I think. Yep.
Yeah, and so you have these sort of like, oh, I'm going to go here, and I find out this little bit more information, and of course we both played it, so we know where that's building to. But at the time, it was what's this about? What is this all about? And then you'll have sort of these little cutscenes between Vader and Moke, where they'll be talking about something that you've actually learned a little bit about, and they'll tell you more about it, which is interesting. That is a total Star Wars thing as well, where you go and see the bad guys talking, and you find out something that's going to happen. It happens in TIE Fighter. It happens in the movies. It's always happening in Star Wars in a way that a lot of games don't really pay off on. I mean, it's not like in Wolfenstein, you see Hitler talking to somebody, we're going to have a bunch of guys in this area for that are going to kill the guys coming in, right? You don't tend to see that stuff in a lot of shooters, especially, but even games in general, you don't often get the perspective of the villains.
Yeah.
And it feels like a thing that we've always leaned on in Star Wars to a degree. Although I guess we did it a bit in the Starfighter games. I'm going to say, I don't think we did it in Republic Commando.
No, Republic Commando was we can tell some stories about that, but it's definitely a focal point of topic in any day-to-day, game development, I would say. And that concept, I mean, whatever, go all the way from Bowser to Ganon to, what I mean? Like there's the Nintendo's version of it as well. Yeah. But Star Wars has got a good formula for it, so it's easy to focus on how to replicate that. Not easy, but you can see the formula at least. Still hard to execute on, but But the build up, and I, like you said earlier, like having putting Vader in the scene with Moke, you know what I mean, gives him credibility as well and boosts him up, so you feel like he's an important character, even though you've never seen him before this game,
right?
And then this concept of just trickling out these breadcrumbs about the Dark Troopers with the material. First, you see in the massacre, you see the aftermath, right, of them, and then you're like, oh man, what are these things? And then you hear, I think wasn't there even some audio file at some point?
I think you're right.
Where of the base being attacked. Yeah, it was a calamari, right over the
right.
Yep. And so then you go to the research facility to find the material, and then you go to the mines to blow up where they're mining this stuff. And
at some point, I think you find their weapon or a weapon that they were going to use.
Yep. That was in the massacre, maybe that was in the subtraining, or that was in the.
Yeah, I can't remember. I mean, some of this stuff I don't remember exactly where it happens, but the build up is I'm getting lots of little bits, and I'm being told. I mean, you basically project onto the Vader stuff, for example, that, well, yeah, I've seen him in the movies doing stuff, but I don't see him all the time. So this is the other stuff he does with his time, right? I mean, it just like slots in really, really well of, well, I mostly spend time with the heroes, and occasionally you'll see Vader, and he's, killing somebody with his force choke or whatever, and and then we cut away. But these are the other things he does. These are the other people he directs, and I'm dealing with them, which I really like. I mean,
yeah, that extended fiction. Yeah.
Yep. It's a good fantasy fulfillment. I mean, the guy probably works at least 40 hours a week, and we only see him, a few minutes of that time. So he's got to talk with a lot of underlings.
Well, and then you go to the robots facility where they're actually making them as well. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So you kind of come full circle. And then as a quick aside, technically the Dark Troopers are battle droids. Just for the record. Just for the record, they literally are called battle droids, but it was before battle droids were a thing. So I don't know if George got that from Dark Forces or what, but his battle droids were not as good as these. So
I mean, they were earlier in the canon.
Okay, all right, yeah, okay, good job.
Yeah. You would have thought that they would have been like, oh, that really didn't work out for us so well last time.
Yeah,
they are. It's funny. There are like the the heavy. I guess we just call it the heavy battle droid.
Heavy battle droid. Yeah, that's true. There's some similarities there.
They're a little closer to that, although they have definitely Terminator style motion, and we definitely don't have anything like what is it called, the Droidica?
No,
the rolling one.
No,
that's definitely not in Dark Forces. But yeah, who knows? Maybe they maybe George was paying more attention to the games than we thought. I doubt it, but maybe.
Yeah.
All right. What do you say we put a pin in it there? Come back to everything else next week, but take a quick break.
Yeah,
and come back to it. Come back to it in a week.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Welcome back from the break. Thanks for listening. We also have some email feedback this time and one very short review. So we'll blaze through it. But you can send your email to devgameclub@gmail.com. I try to reply to every email. And in fact, there's one email I'm going to mention that we're not going to read just to explain about the reviews, which is a whole different thing with my singing reviews. Anyway, Tim, I gave you the first review. I mean, the first email. Let's go ahead and tackle that first.
Okay. Subject is motion sickness in games from Moss. Hello, Moss. Hi, guys. I tried to watch Brett's stream last night on Tuesday the 22nd and just couldn't do it. Games like that get me all kinds of barfy. I remember puking once after playing Doom as a kid, and my friend's mom thought I hated her cooking. It's been 24 years and I'll never forget disappointing her. I didn't realize it was the game at the time and she wouldn't have had a clue either. Only later did I realize games like that, just with the camera movement, nauseated me. Half-Life gave me the same problem. How much thought goes into this for devs, and what can they do to mitigate the problem? I haven't had this issue with most modern games, so perhaps the problems have been fixed? ? Moss. This is a funny question because talking about it this week at work. And I actually have had with first-person shooters myself. I occasionally have this problem when I watch somebody play. I don't have it when I play them usually. And ironically for me, the original Halo games, when I watched them, they were the worst. And we luckily have, at least at Microsoft at 343, we have our usability research lab on the main campus. They have studies and ways to help us kind of troubleshoot this stuff. And I'm not an expert in it, but my understanding is that it often, Brett may know more about this, but it's often a combination of a few different important variables. One, and it's kind of a combination of these coming together that can cause it for different people for different reasons. And it's really hard to nail down why it's happening at some times for some people and not for others. But it's a combination of frame rate, FOV, head movement, like we just talked about with Dark Forces, and then sometimes the rendering style.
Right.
But frame rate
and focal point as well. Having a dot you can look at or something like that helps.
Yeah, right. Yes, and this one doesn't have crosshairs, Dark Forces, so that might be it too. But FOV and frame rate were two of the bigger ones that you have to be careful with. And for those who don't know, for Halo 5, we went to 60 frames from 30 with the previous Halo game, so I think that helped people out too. But yeah, you got to stay that rock solid frame rate no matter what your frame rate is going to be at. So yeah, that's what I know, but it's definitely on people's minds because, to be honest, like sometimes team members get nauseous, nauseous for the games they're working on. So it's pretty evident when we cross a line because people in their, people sitting right next to you will bring it up because, So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a person who gets motion sickness from playing, but like Moss, it depends on the engine. I will also say another thing about watching versus playing is that when you're playing, subconsciously that the turn is coming, right? So your body, you're ready for the fact that the camera's going to whip around, and you're not in the case of in the case of watching somebody play. So that's another thing I think is just intention of knowing, oh, I intend to turn, and knowing, not in a conscious way, but you're driving along. I mean, there's a lot of people who get motion sick when they're sitting in the car, but not when they're driving. And it's because they know that they're about to turn, and that sort of control gives them a lot of knowledge. And it helps rectify the inner ear for that as well. For me, FOV and a focal point are huge. Bobbing actually is also really bad for me, so I always turn it off if I can. But I couldn't play The Witness when it came out, and that's basically a puzzle game. But I couldn't play it because you have to navigate around the island, and so you have to find the puzzles basically. And walking around was miserable for me. And a later patch helped a lot. They allowed you to increase the FOV and add a point, a crosshair basically in the center of the screen, and both of those helped quite a bit. I still couldn't play for long periods, but before that, it had been like 20 minutes before I would start to really like have to turn the thing off. It happened to me also with the Source engine, so it is a thing that happens to me a lot. There's other. It's interesting because this is a real problem, of course, for VR. And in particular, women are more affected often by this sort of motion sickness. And that's something that we don't often account for. It's another reason for diversity in teams because the wider spread of humanity that you cover with your development team, the more likely you are to find problems like these. But a lot of VR research has been done in more or less all male environments, and I guess partly women are not attracted to something that's going to make them sick, but also just tech is a very male discipline, unfortunately. So that sort of stuff crops in, and you just have to deal with it after it comes out. I mean, nobody wants to give away half the audience, rather. So it's a whole huge thing. Rendering style, though, is another thing. I think part of the Witnesses, the thing with the Witnesses, it's sort of these big block colors. And I could see it happening with Dark Forces. I don't feel it, although if I play for several hours, as I did on Saturday, I sometimes get there. But for the most part, no. So yeah, a lot of different reasons it can happen in terms of designing for it. I think diversity of the team is a huge thing, so at least it's happening. If you have a usability lab at your disposal, that's awesome. Most don't, so I think trying to find a way to reach out to people who you think would represent your audience but aren't on the team, so some sort of beta with families and friends that covers as wide a gamut as you can is a good way to go as well. So those are things that I think you have to think about. So anyway, Yeah. It's unfortunate. I wish it didn't happen to me. I think it's worse because I stand when I play a lot too. So,
yeah, could be.
All right. So I have the second one here. It's called Speedrunning and Design. It's from David Sullivan, if that is your real name. Hi guys, love the podcast. When I find time to listen to it, it's got to be one of the coziest podcasts out there.
I'll take it.
Cozy.
I like it.
Yeah, we're cozy. That's what they call it. The British murders, cozies. That's what. Anyway, I'm not a speedrunner, but I watch some speedrun content. I find the whole act of it quite interesting, mainly due to the extreme dedication and lengths runners go to find glitches and environmental tricks to shave mere seconds off a time. I was wondering if you guys are interested at all in speedrunning and if it has ever come to mind when designing a game. Obviously, you would have come across glitches you had to remove, but is there anything you've left in or noticed and thought, wow, some speedrunner could take real advantage of this? Is that something designers even think of? Sorry if this question is a little broad. I hope you can conjure some interesting takes on it. Again, love the cast. Not sure how you feel about it, but would love to hear you guys talk about Braid one day. Oh, he snuck one in on me. I didn't even notice that. This one came in right before we were recording. Cheers, David from Woi Woi, Australia. I hope I'm pronouncing that somewhere near to correct. But thank you, David. Speedrunning.
Yeah, we don't tend to have cycles to focus on designing for it or intentionally, I will say. And I think I don't think that's for lack of desire to want to, because we definitely appreciate and often we'll watch speedruns for games, especially the Halo stuff, because we're always interested. Halo's, because it's such a physics-based sandbox, a lot of fun zaniness can be found by players, and we embrace that. Where it does come in, as opposed to the intentional version of designing for speedrunners, where it does come in is in the debugging process, where I can't think of, there's a couple levels in 5 specifically, but I don't have a good specific example, but I do remember going through bug triage occasionally and finding bugs that we would have a debate about whether we should fix or not, and basically allowing them to stay in because we hope that it's not a super game breaking bug, so it's safe enough to keep it in, but we hope that speedrunners will find it and use it because it's so fun and interesting. And usually, obviously, our QA who are scouring the game are the ones finding it, but then obviously speedrunners find stuff that we didn't even find in the debug process. So if it doesn't go super crazy in breaking the game, or it's really hard to get to or rare, we will often just leave them in because we want people to use them for speedruns. So it comes up occasionally, but I wish it were more proactive, but it really isn't for us.
Yeah. So, at Bethesda, while we didn't specifically try to support speedrunning, it certainly was a thing that we knew was a possibility. And one of the things that is a tradition there is at the end of every project, QA sends their fastest player and development sends their fastest player to square off and do a speed run of the game through the main quest. And that has been going on for quite a while. I saw both the Fallout 3 and the Skyrim ones. Normally it's often, I won't say normally, it's often one of the level designers. Typically the lead level designer, Jeff Brown in particular, I can remember doing it. I think he did it both times that I can remember. And they'll send up somebody from QA, and they will find some really weird things that you can do, like interrupt. So we have in Bethesda games, there's this thing where you can, as a designer, they can cause a character to force greet you, we called it. Basically, they force you into dialogue. And if you punch them before that happens, you can interrupt their dialogue, but you have to time it right. So there's like lots of weird quirks in the engine that are really not worth fixing because as Tim said, it's sort of like, well, maybe there's some fun to be had there, but it's also just, well, who cares, right? Most players will not encounter the game this way. Most players are not going to have some friendly person come talk to them and punch them instead, right? So it's not really worth worrying about, but it does lead to these sort of weird things. And especially in Skyrim, where you had some special abilities that you got from the shouts and stuff like that, there were cases where you could shortcut levels that were on the critical path, the golden path for the game, you could actually cut off minutes from your time. I mean, typically, these speed runs are not competitive because the game hasn't even been in a finished state long enough for them to be really competitive worldwide or anything like that. But it is often interesting to be like, look at that, you can use the systems in this way. But for the really inventive stuff, we definitely have to rely on players to find it. I know that Oblivion has a speed run, relies a little bit on luck, but you can finish the game really quickly by basically getting a potion, I think, that lets you fly and get into the final confrontation area within minutes. It's ridiculously short for the size of that game. So it's just kind of funny when people describe that. Or maybe it might have been Morrowind. I can't remember. But I mean, these things are they're kind of amazing, and you're just like, wow, that's a side effect of that I didn't think would work that way. I think Deus Ex had a lot of that sort of stuff too. Not necessarily to make the game shorter, but just to be able to get to places that you didn't expect that players could get. So a lot of stuff. Anyway, thank you for your email, David. I also want to shout out to Aaron, our friend from Houston, who sent me a suggestion. I'm not going to re-sing the song, but last week we had a singing review, and he identified it as likely TNT by AC/DC.
Oh, yeah. Okay. There we go.
And I will say that I'm not going to be able to pick up songs just from prosody, just from like the lyrics kind of matching the rhythm of the song. So if that's what you're doing, I am not going to pick it up. I'll just tell you right now. I picked up the Tom Waits one because it literally had quotes from the Tom Waits song. I was like, oh, that actually sounds familiar. But this was like a total rewrite that just matched the timing. So I still appreciate the lyric that we got for where DGC from Buttercup Scratch and Sniff, if that is your real name. But yeah, I'm not going to be able to pick that up from pure prosody. Anyway, we didn't get this week another singing review bit. We just got a short one from P. Loppler or Plopler or Pilo Plur. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but anyway, it was interesting and informative. Great insight into game development, which, I mean, that's our whole mission statement right there.
Yeah, that sums it up. Short and sweet. I like it.
Yep. I like it too. So thank you for that. We love to have your reviews. We do try to read and or sing them on the podcast every week. So keep them coming. You can put those into the podcast app on Apple. It helps us reach new listeners, and we certainly appreciate it when we get them. So for next week, we're going to finish this game, right?
That's all the
plan?
way. Yep.
We got four levels or so, something like that.
I think it's 5.
5, okay.
Just close the page, but yeah, I think it's 5.
Okay.
To the Archammer.
So we will. Oh, right. We have to go all the way to the Archammer, and spoilers. We're going to fight somebody who's on that. Probably. I don't want to give it away.
Yeah,
it was already called out for that once. But yeah, we'll tackle that, and then I think in the future we will have some further discussions on this game. So we will not be quite done with it next week, but we will be done with playing it. So until then, I will stay on Twitter at Brett_Duville, and he will be
at Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
Of course, you can find the podcast at Dev Game Club and at devgameclub.com, where we have all 115 episodes and their show notes archived for you. Thanks so much, and good night.
Good night.